Hi, this is Siofra Bradigan, and this is Siofra's Magic Alcove. So, one of you asked me to talk about the differences between New Age and witchcraft because they feel like the edges are being blurred between the two different kinds of thought processes and activities and that kind of thing. So, I've been thinking about this for a while, last couple of weeks actually, and trying to figure out what it is that I see as the difference. And really, the core difference is that witchcraft is about personal development and delving into the dark within us, facing our fears, taking responsibility for our actions, and then coming through that in our shadow work to become a more complete person. And a lot of the New Age stuff, which I went through myself, is about positive thinking, focusing on only the nice things that are out there, the idea that what you focus on becomes your reality, and that kind of thing. So that's sort of like a basic notion of some of the differences that I see. But thinking about, the more specifics, so I would say like tarot is more magic, witchcraft, ceremonial foundations, and has a lot of symbolism and associations, and is about the development of the human soul and the different stages of development that we go through as we're trying to become the best versions of ourselves that we can be. And then things like angel cards, oracle cards, uh, nice picture cards. These are all add-ons to, I think, uh, to make it more marketable for the masses, to try and take out maybe what an average person would think of as the scary stuff that they don't want to think about. And as divination systems, they are generally speaking not as accurate or as comprehensive as, say, learning how to do the tarot or the runes might be. So, let's see. Both systems are very attracted to crystals. The New Age groups, Rainbow Family, and whatnot, have all sort of embraced and adopted the idea of crystal magic or crystal influence or working with crystals or liking crystals. Again, very marketable. Um, and you don't have to have a high quality gemstone of a certain type to do magic. You can have a rock from your yard. I mean, it doesn't have to be even a crystal, although I love working with them myself, and I'm always looking for stones and things like that that I'm attracted to and I want to work with. Some of the marketing for these things that go along with crystals, like the crystal water bottles, so that you can charge up your water with crystals and spend hundreds of dollars on a bottle to do it. I mean, there is so much merchandising and marketing currently going on with the peripheral things that we as witches have dealt with or worked with forever. It's kind of bizarre. And also, the whole idea of getting kits and um, somebody sending you all the things that you need to make an altar, for example. I consider that more new age marketing kind of thing, because really an altar is a very personal representation of who you are and where you're at. And it's there's nothing in the craft that says you have to have the most beautiful statue, the most expensive stone, the best quality candle holder, the super gorgeous goblet. I mean, some of these things are nice to have, but they're not essential. They, the representation of them can be as simple as a clay pot, a wooden chalice, something that you pick up from Goodwill, because the cup represents basically the concept and idea that water needs to have a container in order to have a shape, because without it, it has no shape. There's no definitive edge in water at all. And so if you can't get something to put it in, then it's very difficult to work with. But what the container looks like doesn't matter. It can be the wrong color, doesn't matter. It's your connection to the relationship between the cup and the water that is the thing that matters when it comes to magic. So one of the things that I see is the influence of the notion that you are in charge of and control all of your thoughts, and that what you think becomes reality. While there is some basis in this, certainly what you focus on and put energy into, you can attract or begin to notice, but making it manifest physically, the book The Secret is a primer for superficial notions of whatever you wish for is now yours. All you have to do is wish for it the right way, and what you want is manifested. And that's not how magic works. It's a very well marketed book. There certainly are some notions and ideas in there that we can use. And as an eclectic, there's any number of things that I can make use of. But to look for the substance, the history, the connection, the foundation of it, and to understand why you're using it. Just because you buy some wonderfully crafted, beautiful image cards and lay them out to look at them doesn't mean that they're a good divination tool, that they're going to tell you what you need to know. However, if you are good at divination, it doesn't matter what you use. So go ahead and use the colorful imagery cards. I mean, but to understand that it's not the deck, it's not the cards themselves that tell you what's going on. Except for me, with the tarot, there's this long line of association throughout history of people using those particular images in the effort to understand possible futures and tendencies and where you're going and what's happening to you and that kind of thing. One of the other things that I've noticed, especially recently, is this concept that no one can have a bad idea. And any idea that you think is reality should be respected by everyone else, regardless of how you came up with it or whether it has any basis in or foundation in the world of magic or reality, because the two things are part of the same process. The same coin, makes both of them. So I think the New Age, that idea that in some universe, anything you can imagine can become real. While it's true that when you are no longer in physical form and in this universe, but in like a mystical or spiritual plane, that anything you think of can become your reality and you can create it around you, that doesn't translate to the physical plane, no matter how good of imagination that you have. And I think that part of witchcraft is about accepting reality. I mean, looking it square in the face and understanding natural processes and things in order to enhance understanding of larger flows, cycles, energetic changes, and all that stuff. So, like, getting a book of positive sayings, so there's one positive saying a day for you to focus on. Depending on what you're focusing on, is not necessarily a bad idea, but it isn't witchcraft. It is something else. And, learning how to control your mind is definitely a good thing. So, the shift that I experienced when the whole New Age thing started going full bore when I was channeling, um, one of the things that I noticed was that all of a sudden there was this notion that universal love was something that was applied to everyone no matter what and who and where they were. And it was very confusing as a woman to suddenly have all these men come up and espouse this universal love, brotherhood, sisterhood kind of thing and want to come in and get a hug. It more often than not seemed like an opportunity to cop a feel than a genuine emotion, a real thing. And so I decided after a period of time that basically it's creating an environment where boundaries are discouraged, for one, and boundaries are something that we need to have in order to define ourselves and in order to have a space in the world from which to travel and explore. Boundaries are essential for good relationships of any kind. I decided I didn't like it at all. I mean, I've been in environments where that kind of thing was going on, and it's still happening because it's still a key point in some religions, the Unitarian and Unity churches and things like that, of that nature, is like I've had total strangers come up, grab a hold of me, give me a full body hug, and tell me how much they love me and how wonderful I am, and I don't know their name. And to me, that's superficial, ingenuine, and uncomfortable. And no one asked for my permission to grab a hold of me and hug me and tell me that they loved me. And so unwanted and sort of a violation of my personal space. And this idea of having boundaries is something that in the beginning of the New Age movement was dissuaded. It's like you didn't want people to have that. The idea of community, everybody living together, everybody loving each other, everybody working together, and so forth. Good foundation for making a good cult, and a number of them came out of that. Uh, but not necessarily a good foundation for becoming a healthy person, uh, a quality human being, someone who stands for something, someone who knows who they are and what they want and what they don't want. And any kind of environment that discourages you from saying no is a bad environment, in my opinion. And then, the idea that everything we think affects our reality. I've seen that in my massage practice on a regular basis. We have had several different chiropractors in our community that are that embrace that whole idea that if you're not thinking right, you're making yourself sick. And I've had some of my clients that have gone to these individuals and have been told that the reason why they're in pain is because they're just not thinking well. And I look at them and I'm going like, but you were hit by a truck, and a truck is real. I mean, that is a physical impact. And sure, having a positive attitude, trying to focus on the good things, trying to, put your energy in that direction is not a bad idea. But by ignoring the reality of a broken bone or the bruises or, internal injuries, and put it all down to you're just not pure enough, you're not thinking clearly enough, you're not being positive, and because you're not being positive, you're pulling all this negative energy into you and all this other stuff, which is not actually true, not from our perspective. So you can't transform something if you don't accept it and embrace it first, and then you can understand why it's there. And when you understand its reason for existing, then you can change and transform it into something that works better for you, which is the whole point of shadow work. So there's that part. And then there's the part like the Rainbow Family. I've run into them at different events. You know, they're all quote unquote spiritual and free and so forth. And one of their tenets, if you want to call them that, is that they have no rules and no human rules can tell them what to do. Rules are for other people, they're not for them. Again, a boundary issue. And so, for example, at the Native American medicine wheel ceremonies that I went to in the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia, one year the Rainbow people arrived and they were disrespectful of everybody. There was rules. There were no drugs or alcohol on the premises. They didn't care. They got drunk. They got stoned. Whatever they felt like doing. You weren't supposed to, take off all your clothes in the river because there were people there that would be uncomfortable with that, but they didn't care about that. I mean, they just went wherever they wanted to and did whatever they wanted, and it was incredibly annoying and disrespectful. And so the idea that being disrespectful shows that you're free from the chains of convention, I think is a fallacy. It just means that you don't care about other people's feelings and you don't value their boundaries, and you don't take no for an answer. So again, no boundaries. And when I was on Mount Shasta and Charlie Tom was doing a sweat up there on the mountain, and he was a traditional Modoc and learned how to do this from his grandfather. And he would go out on Shasta for like 3 days, picking the sacred herbs and doing the prayers and whatever else his tradition required to prepare for doing the sweat lodges. And then, of course, with the sweat lodge, there's some very precise practices: the building of the sacred fire, the tending of the sacred fire. The people who tend the sacred fire for a sweat lodge have to be pure in their thoughts, in their heart, and because whatever they feel will go into the fire and will contaminate the stones when they are heated up to be used for spiritual purposes. And, there's someone tending this fire 24 hours a day. It's a sacred duty. And the Rainbow people would come up and light their cigarettes off of the sacred fire, throw things that they wanted to burn up into the sacred fire, completely, I'm not even sure what word to use for that. Complete disrespect for someone's tradition, which is not okay. And they were going to the bathroom in the woods around the sweat lodge. And of course, because of this lack of respect and care for other people's traditions, and they thought everybody was being pretty silly, that they thought they shouldn't be doing this stuff, and they were trying to help us, I suppose. We ended up with a pretty long lecture on decorum, and I understood why every time I went to one of these events I ended up with a lecture. It wasn't because of me. It was because of all these other morons that were out there and did not know how to behave properly. And they even went so far as in one of the sweats I was in, someone threw their own herbs onto the sacred stones when we were in the middle of the sweat, and the sweat leader immediately noticed it and, called him out on it. And he was like, I didn't mean to be disrespectful. Saying that you don't mean to be disrespectful while you're being disrespectful doesn't mean anything. Actions speak louder than words. And he knew better, and I'm sure everyone there by then, since we'd had the lecture, knew better than to do that. And I was very impressed with the sweat leader's ability to change the energy in that sweat lodge after that event happened, because when that happened, the energy was completely intense and negative for a period of time. And he did his sacred songs and completely shifted the energy in the sweat lodge. So it was, amazing thing to witness. In fact, it was so intense when it first happened. The person who was standing by me, he was sweating onto me, and his sweat became acid and burned my skin when it touched me. So, yeah, sometimes how we feel and how we think can definitely affect physical reality, and that was a good example of it. But it doesn't happen all the time. So, one of the other things that I hear a lot about from people who are interested in becoming a witch or learning magic is the idea of becoming ascended and manifesting whatever you want whenever you want it, which is another thing that is actually not part of witchcraft. That's a new age idea. The idea that all of us as human beings could suddenly evolve and become like better versions of ourselves and be able to create our own reality. Considering the state of most people that are out there, if it happened actually across the board, and Ian and I were just talking about this on the way to the store, if everyone's thoughts were suddenly made manifest in the rooms that they were in, we would be extinct within a day because we wouldn't be able to sustain all that stuff because it would be too much. And anytime anyone thought that they would like to see you taken out, that would be the end of you, or same if you thought at them. And I mean, we are not at that stage yet in human evolution where very many people could evolve to that level. There might be a couple here and there, but they are definitely, it's definitely not like a big thing that's going to happen. And the worry about the world ending, the Christians and the Abrahamic religions all have this fascination with and focus on the end of the world fulfilling prophecy. The New Age people have their own version of the same thing. And some witch groups have their version of the same thing. And it doesn't serve anyone to actually focus on that. Makes me feel kind of creepy actually thinking about how many people out there are hoping that I'm going to die a terrible, horrible death and burn in oil or have boils all over my body or starve to death or whatever the current version is. And that will make them happy because then they would be right. As not an effective approach to take. Um, and it's become more and more constant. And the light workers that are New Age oriented, um, they're very strict about not being, you're not allowed to defend yourself, protect yourself with your energy. You're not even allowed to just stop negative energy from coming at you because that's considered an attack, an assault on the other person by sending it back. And again, no boundaries. You're not permitted to have a boundary. You're not permitted to have a response, a normal human response. And like the difference between an ideal, like with the universal love thing, when I'm dead in the spirit, I can love everybody the same and I can have universal love for all of them because we're all in the same place. But when we're down here, I don't know you. I don't know who you are. I don't know what's in your heart when I first meet you. As far as I know, you could be a serial killer or a violent offender of some other kind or a scammer or a sociopath or, and living in a physical reality, I defend myself from potential danger because I want to be here as long as I can be. So far, I've managed to survive this long, so yay me. But that spreading that idea that if you have any quote unquote negative feelings, then you're not evolved or spiritual or whatever is another one of those places where witchcraft and New Age ideology differ. Because, you know, power comes from a lot of different places. Power comes from rage as well as love. And depending on the circumstances and the situation, the universe is made out of chaotic events that are exploding all around us, without which no life would exist. So, as a nature-based religion, and we look at nature as our example of how things work and how to work with them, everything eats something. There's no real safety, no matter where you are. There's no order, not really. Order is a temporary condition or state of existence that's a pause between different chaotic events when it comes to the way the universe functions. I mean, if the universe was orderly when it began, it would have died immediately. We wouldn't have a universe. It's only the chaos and the collisions and the explosions and the mixing together of differing elements and creating new ones out of it that has created the universe that we're in. And even our planet, we had to get hit by another planet and absorb part of its core and, take water from comets. And, it's like all this stuff was fiercely chaotic. And we still have lots of that left over with volcanoes and storms and things like that. It's like, I think one of the reasons why people get interested in witchcraft is because they think it will give them control over their lives in a sense that is not possible to actually have. It's not like in the movies. It gives you control over yourself, but only to the point where you're willing to face who you are and do the work in order to become a better version of who you are. And, you know, accept the things that don't work as well as the things that do, and then learn how to move those things around to make them work for you. Because of the fact that I'm an eclectic, there's certainly plenty of things that I can see the New Age movement is up to that I can use as a witch, but I'm not interested in the hype. I'm not interested in the readings. That's another thing. There's all these people out there doing psychic readings, and while it may be useful on occasion to get some guidance from someone else, it also means that you have dissolved your sense of responsibility. You've given responsibility for your path over to someone else who may or may not know what they're doing, and letting them decide and influence you about your life and following them. So becoming an individuation, that's not how to do that. That's not the way to go about it. And so lack of individuation, lack of acceptance of the shadow self, lack of acceptance of physical reality and its limitations, which actually give rise to the physical world in which we exist. These are things that don't serve us as witches at all. And these are often the things that the New Age movement and the marketing strategies and so forth that the companies that have jumped on the bandwagon are using in order to make a profit, because that's what it is for them. It's about making money. Gwyneth Paltrow doesn't care about you. She doesn't care about your spiritual existence. She doesn't care about your life. She doesn't care about any of that stuff, as far as I can see, because she charges exorbitant amounts of money for people to buy stuff to make them feel like they're getting somewhere. And true progress, again, it's not about how much you spend on something. It's not about how popular an item might be or any of that stuff. This is an individual path to self-awareness and self-control and responsibility, full responsibility for our own mistakes, and not dissembling our mistakes and pretending that they're based in something else, but like stark look and really seeing what's there, because that's where power is. That's when you don't get tricked and you don't get fooled by the glitz and the glamour and so forth. So personally, I don't think that aliens are here to save us. If they are here, they're not here to save us, because why would they bother? I don't think there's a galactic brotherhood of light out there trying to raise our vibrational level. I think that these are all mechanisms that we use to try and keep hope alive if we don't have certain religions in order to do that. to fill that kind of hole, that fear, anxiety of the future and what it might hold and what may happen to us. Um, but again, it's taking away personal responsibility from us to actually fix the things that we find and puts it away from us, whether it's in religion for a god or angels or whoever out there in order to, take care of us or take care of things, or whether it's the aliens that are there to do the same thing. Again, we're not doing it ourselves, so we are not evolving. Whenever we do that, we are not evolving into ourselves. So it's like, I find it confusing and frustrating, and people can believe whatever they want, and I'm fine with them believing whatever they want. But it saddens me when I see people believing in things that aren't going to help them do anything. Whether it's the conspiracy theories that are out there about the earth being flat, or there are no real birds left in the world because the governments have gotten rid of them all and turned them into drones to spy on us. You know, I think all of those things are ways to externalize this core anxiety of fear of the unknown, and the future is the unknown. So they're coping mechanisms that we use, and different people use different coping mechanisms. I'm sure I must have some, but I'm not sure what they are at the moment. But trying to be myself, the best version of me I can be, is my goal. So when you're looking at information, when I look at information and I'm trying to decide what I want to incorporate into my practice, one of the criteria that I have used is, does it have any historical context? Is there a length of history through different cultures or a specific culture or whatever where this has been a way of doing this particular thing? And who knows if I'm right, but it makes me feel more uh, confident in my dealings with the spirit world and so forth when I have that connection and feel that connection. Of course, as someone who remembers numerous past lives, I have a very different perspective than a lot of people might have, because they only remember being in the one that they're in. And so there's certain ways of thinking that make no sense to me because I've thought that way before and it didn't work, or yeah, I don't know. But this is a solitary path, and the idea of community is something that's very appealing in the New Age ideal of people working together to create a new utopia, some kind of civilization or whatever that takes everyone into account and leaves no one out, but also means that you don't have any choices as far as what you can do, how you can be. I was raised in a family where you were never allowed to say no to a kiss or a hug. And I can tell you it was incredibly traumatizing, especially when my uncle who molested me got to do that to me every holiday, every Christmas and Easter and Thanksgiving. And no one ever gave me the power to say no, and you can't do that to me. I don't like it. So that's the other thing, is like, not liking something is a big red flag for certain philosophies. And I don't like pepper. My body doesn't like pepper. My mouth doesn't like pepper. I mean, you know, and I don't need to accept it. Pepper can live without me and without my acknowledging its existence as a wonderful food group, which I'm sure it is. I don't have to eat it in order for that to exist. It can be outside of me, and that's okay. This is an example. Um, I think the more we know about how the world actually works, the better, the more likely we are to avoid certain pitfalls of thinking, fantastical thinking. I mean, magical, fantastical thinking is, you know, definitely part of what we do because we're doing magic. And so part of what we do requires the ability to set aside um, uh, suspend disbelief while we're doing it. And then if we see results, then we reinforce the effect that it might have. You know, like, did we do it right? Did we have a real effect? But being a witch is about being in the world and not trying to rise above it or to get away from it, to get out of it, um, to ascend from it. That's not what being a witch is about. It can happen in the process. I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility, but the focus is being you and being your best you, um, and not being someone else's idea of what a good you is. We are all so different. We all have so many different kinds of experiences and so forth. And you know, one of the things I like about being a witch is the fact that I actually can go in and rearrange my subconscious. I'm not stuck with what my parents did to me and my uncle did to me when I was too young to be able to stop anything from happening. That programming is not something that has stayed with me for my life, like most of the psychology texts think is the case. I think that we have tools that we can use in order to become better people and reshape ourselves into who we want to be. And we can choose who we want to be. That idea that I am who I am and that's just who I am, there's nothing I can do about it, is a fallacy. If you don't like who you are, then there's a lot of things you can do about it. It just takes a lot of work. And the people I've known throughout the whole New Age thing have been a lot of error. There's a lot of error energy going on in that because it's mental, it's ideas, ideology, it's, you know, in the realm of possibility, but not necessarily achievable possibility. But it's very distracting and can certainly be interesting to look at. So I hope that this has actually given the person who asked the question what they wanted when they asked me the question about the difference between New Age and witchcraft. So, again, succinctly, at its core, being a witch is about self development, accepting and transforming the shadow self, learning boundaries, individuating, becoming a true individual, um, your own shape and no one else's. New Age is more about light, love, uh, never thinking a dark thought, always being positive regardless of circumstances. And if anything happens to you that's negative, it's your fault. You've done it to yourself because of how you thought. And I disagree with all of that part completely. And I'm a pretty positive person. I love life. I love the world. I love animals. I, embrace all kinds of things as being full of beauty and wonder. So, accepting and working with your shadow self doesn't mean you become pessimistic. Might go through a phase for that, possibly, but it doesn't have to stay that way. And yeah, so yeah, that's the other thing. The New Age movement came in with reincarnation really pushed home the idea that whatever karma you have is something you agreed to. So if you're born into an abusive family, then you chose that abusive family, and on some level you wanted to be abused, which I disagree with completely, because that leaves the responsibility for the abuser completely out of the equation. And and again, it's like, yeah, everything is your own fault. So that's a big one. And I know I've told you guys before in other videos that my first husband, who was a serial rapist, used the idea of karma exactly that way. When he was raping women, he was helping them because, they wouldn't have put themselves there in that position for him to be able to do what he did unless on some level they thought they deserved it and they wanted him to do it. And he was helping them clear the slate of karma. So, yeah, I had a pretty vivid moment of realization that, yeah, those kinds of rationalizations are dangerous and shouldn't be allowed to continue. So that's me. And, it's like, it doesn't have to be, being a witch doesn't have to be flashy, it doesn't have to be expensive, it doesn't have to, you don't have to get results quickly. It's a life path. It is a way of being, a way of existing in the world and interacting with the world around you on as many levels as you can reach. And so, and it should be your decision what you want to do. You shouldn't leave the decision of your life in someone else's hands and let them tell you what you're supposed to do. Because what you're supposed to do is what you decide you're supposed to do. Making mistakes is not a bad thing. So, okay, I'll stop now and leave you to ask questions or make comments or what have you. And again, people are free to believe whatever they want. If you disagree with me, that's okay. It's not going to change how I feel about the universe or how I act within it. But, everyone has to find their own way. So this is Siofra Bradigan, and this has been Siofra's Magic Alcove. Blessed be.